Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. So far we discussed about different processes for public policy making, and also we tried to discuss about different microeconomics elements and also macroeconomic elements which are used in public policy. We also discussed about different principles of public policy. So when we are talking about economics of public policy, it is also very important to understand different methods and tools and even techniques to identify right from the beginning, that is problem identifications, which is the first step of the public policy framework. Why these methods, tools and techniques are important? So why this is a problem and what are the problem? So market failure, coordination failure and distributional concerns, these are the problems in economics when we look at resource allocations and distributions. And when market fails, that is one of the problems that we try to address. Why is it happening? Because high inflations, high inequality, underutilizations of resources, labor market frictions. So these are the problems that we identify, but then we also need to address them very scientific way. And what are the feasible interventions? So definitely we also discuss this. Taxes, subsidies, regulations and different transfers through various government programs can be the feasible interventions to address those problems. So now let's think about the paradox, since we already discussed about the macroeconomic equations, which is y equals to c plus I plus g plus x minus m in case of open economy. And we also discussed about the role of GDP, especially for the policy makers' perspective, and for any nations, and its prosperity growth was taken as one of the most important tools to consider in economics. So understandably, that industrialization resulted in faster growth of the nation, which give us high growth rate, and also gives us high GDP, and therefore higher GDP is very important for a nation. And GNP becomes the goal in 1950s and 1960s, and in this particular context we also discussed about Harrod-Domar growth model and also Solow growth model, where we spoke about how savings rate and incremental capital output ratios are important, and savings and investments are important for Harrod-Domar as well as in the Solow growth model. Economic growth, however, did not translate to a better living standard for the people, and then the debate over poverty came. So growth is not only one solution from economics, and therefore the entire debate about the development came, and therefore it was also kind of accepted that GDP is not enough for addressing poverty or overall nations or people's development. And therefore this one can see as a paradox, and it leads to the debate over poverty, especially in 1990s onwards, along with the open up of the economies across the world. Millennium Development Goal came in 1990s, and then that goal was tried to be achieved till 2015, and then from 2015, as we know that we have sustainable development goals in order to eradicate poverty, to address hungers and inequality, as a bigger framework. And therefore poverty is one of the points of the discussions. And let us also kind of be very clear right from the beginning, like poverty is not the same as hunger, because hunger is far worse than poverty. And poverty, how do we calculate poverty? That is again one of the questions that we need to be very careful when we look at economics, as a method or tools to address the poverty. So poverty lines are measured to identify how many people are falling below the poverty line and how many people are falling above the poverty line. So poverty line gives the threshold, which also does not only mean a comfortable living standard, it also represents the absolute minimum. So poverty line, let us make it very clear that poverty line is the line that will determine to understand the absolute minimum values for basic standard of livings or basic livings. So policy should work towards not only reducing the number of people below the line, but also ensure that people in general enjoy a much higher standard of livings. And one should not actually think that poverty is unidirectional or unidimensional. Poverty is multidimensional. That we'll discuss in this class. And deprivation in income, literacy, malnutrition, mortality, morbidity, access to water, sanitation, and vulnerability to economic shocks. So these are the indicators are broadly have taken into consideration while understanding poverty. And therefore it is very clear is poverty is not only about persons or people's level of income. Income deprivation is linked in many cases to understand different forms of deprivations, but does not always move along with the other deprivations. So the first question in context of poverty is like, why do we need to estimate poverty? So poverty estimates are essential to design the framework and monitor and implement appropriate anti-poverty policies. As at the beginning I had said, like for Millennium Development Goals or Sustainable Development Goals, there are certain goals are there to eradicate poverty or to introduce anti-poverty programs, so that poverty can be kind of tackled, not completely eradicated, but it can be tackled. And therefore while addressing this poverty, so it is very important to understand different region and socio-economic groups, like strata in the society, and also socio-political environment of any particular context. And it is also very important to understand various determinants that are affecting the poverty. And this is particularly very important while framing any policy or economic policy for resource allocations. Like the two examples that we had given at the beginning is like distributive and redistributive policies. When we talk about it, it is very important to understand different programs and different socio-economic and regional context to address the poverty. So measuring poverty, there are a couple of approaches. Standard measures of income poverty, combined monetary measures of the household economic welfare. And if we look at early kind of measures for the poverty, it is all about the income, like economic way we have tried to calculate, and we try to understand how how many people are actually living below the poverty line. In fact, poverty line is measured based on the level of income. We will discuss that in this lecture. So now when we are talking about economic welfare, we really need to understand two ways in which we can actually achieve. One is through income, the other one is through consumption, so or expenditure on consumption. So either we follow income approach or expenditure approach. And consumption becomes very important, especially country like India, where large share of workforce informally engaged in the labor market, and where income becomes very uncertain. And but then so identifying poor is very important in framing public policy, and therefore consumption becomes very important tools. So consumption expenditure is important indicator for the for poverty calculations or estimating the poverty. So now there are two ways in which poverty lines can be drawn. One is of course absolute, the other one is relative. So this poverty line can be based on functioning based approach, and then when we talk about absolute poverty, so here absolute poverty nutrition based calculation is taken into considerations, and that's how minimum wages for instance is calculated, like food energy intake method, and which is based on calorie. And here calorie based method calculation is important, for instance, to understand minimum wages set in rural workers, or what should be the minimum wage for the urban workers, because calorie intake required for agricultural work is different that calorie required in domestic work or the construction work in the urban areas. And also price of the products in urban areas are different than prices in of the products in the rural areas. So therefore food energy intake is one of the very popular methods to calculate, where we consider calorie, and cost of basic needs method, where we try to calculate cost of consumption bundle, and we'll talk about that. So, and on the other hand, relative poverty line, here cost of poverty line depends on the poverty level of the utility, and differences in the cost of social inclusion also is there. Now let's move to one more important economic indicator which is used not only to calculate cost of living, but at the same time it also gives or helps to calculate inflation, and that is consumer price index. So consumer price index is the price of a weighted average market basket of consumer goods and services purchased by households. So steps are very simple. First, household should fix the basket of goods and services, find the prices, like take the example of any household, and what are the monthly consumption of that household, like food items, non-food items, and then try to find out the prices of say rice, wheat, or vegetables, fruits, or meat, or fish, or eggs, and then try to find out their unit price, that is the second price, and then compute the total cost of the basket, and then choose a base year and compute the index. So this is how it is calculated. Will not get much into details because this is a part of the macroeconomics, but then these are the tools are very important while framing the policy, framing the economic policy in particular. So as you know that we have three important index, and these three can be used for consumer price index calculations. One is last payers price index. Here you can see, like base year's quantity of any commodity is fixed, like Q naught and Q naught, and then relative price, like that ratio P 1 by P naught is taken into account. On the other hand, patches index, the current quantity of the current period of any particular goods, like whether it is wheat or rice, is fixed, and then it is taken from the it is actually calculated by multiplying the price ratio, like P1 by P naught. And Fisher index, price index, is another which takes square root of last payers price index and patches price index. So this is like this price index, that's how we calculate, and this index are helpful to calculate. consumer price index, and consumer price index will give us how to calculate inflation. So now poverty and its measures. So let's have a quick look how we calculate, and then we'll say that how the initial poverty, the way we tried to calculate poverty, it is based on income approach. So suppose parameters that we have taken, like capital N is a total population between 1 and N, and 1 is considered as the poorest and N is the richest in the total population. Small q is the number of poor households or poor individuals out of N, and Z is the minimally acceptable level of per capita household income. So this is a threshold level of income that we have taken into account. So one way that we try to understand quickly to understand our positions about the poverty stricken households or poverty stricken people is like to count the head counts ratio. So head count ratio Q by N, so where small q is the total number of poor people, and then we want to understand Q out of total N, like total number of populations. Now let's have a understanding on total income gap, like TYG households. So Z is minimally minimally acceptable level of income, and then Y is like individual household income if we are considering Y is household income, and where I equals to 1 to Q, like Q number of households. So this will give us like this Z minus Y1 is an income gap between minimally acceptable level of per capita income and household income of household 1 plus Z minus Y2 is basically again the income gap of household 2, and likewise we can get for Z minus YQ. So it's like income of qth household. So we need the sum. So sum of this income gap is referred here as total income gap. So now total proportional income gap is also very important to standardize this gap, and here is Z minus income divided by Z. So this is how the standardizing that we are. So it is basically we are trying to understand total income gap, but this is the proportional total income gap. And then we need to also understand the average proportional income gap, where is just a total proportional income gap divided by total number of household which are poor. So this is average proportional income gap. So now let's come to this. This is important, like poverty gap index. So this is like total proportional income gap, but then with respect to total number of populations. So it's like income gap of the poor household with respect to the total number of populations or total number of households, which is capital N. So this is the poverty gap index broadly, but then one can write like this capital 1 by N we can write as small q by N multiplied by 1 by Q, and then this. So small q by N we can write as H. H is head count ratio here, and then multiply by average proportional income gap. So now if we take squared proportional income gap index to understand the severity of the poverty, so we refer as P2 poverty gap, right? So now H PG and P2 head count ratio, poverty gap, and square proportional income gap index. These are discussed by the Foster, Greek and Thorbecke in 1984 in their paper, and these are actually the class of poverty indices, and which which ranges between 0 to 1, and FGT, they refer about the poverty severity index using this like 1 by n, summation of I equals to 1 to q, and z minus yi by z to the power alpha. So alpha, when alpha equals to 2, then it is severity, poverty severity index, means square proportional income gap index, and if alpha equals to 1, and then it becomes poverty gap index. So all this, whether it is severity poverty index or poverty index, it depends on the value of the alpha, like this one. There is a history behind constructing human development index, and one of the ways in which we try to understand is like HDI is the application of the capability approach, while understanding choice, freedom, functionings, and being and doing. So if we go with the definition, so definition, while defining HDI is a composite in statistic or index of three broad indicators which I have underlined, is life expectancy, education, and per capita income. So you can see like it is deviating from the poverty, which only considers about the income, but this also includes other important factors like life expectancy and the education, and more in general like health indicators and the education. So which is used to rank countries into 4 tiers human development. The human development is a measure of economic development and also economic welfare, and in while you can also understand like while placing human development index, we are talking more about the people centric development. So now the core philosophy is about when we talk about human development index, it is actually equity, sustainability, productivity, and empowerment. So now I have for the visual treat, I have taken this particular picture from UNDP in their website, where it nicely discusses about human development index, its dimensions, its indicators, and in dimension index. So if we look at dimensions, it's like long and healthy life, and knowledge, and decent standard of living. So these are the three dimensions are very important for any human being to live. And then to understand what are the indicators for long and healthy life, for calculating that life expectancy at birth are taken into account, and two sub indicators under knowledge that are considered. One is expected years of schooling, and also mean years of schooling. So this there are two sub indicators under educations, and GNI, gross national income per capita, is taken under a decent standard of living. So in the dimension index, from the long and healthy dimensions, we get life expectancy index, which is coming from life expectancy at birth indicator. Then education index, we get it from expected years of schooling and means years of schoolings, and GNI index is like we get it from GNI per capita. So this is how. And then if we give the equal weightage, like here life expectancy index, and then education index, and GNI index, if we give the equal weightage, like 1 by 3 to make 1, so then we get the human development index, HDI. So now of course we'll not get into details about the history of human development index and what are the theoretical foundations for developing human development index, but then certainly we'll discuss what are the steps that are used while calculating human development index. So as we already discussed, these are the three broad indicators or components which are also can be the proxy for the overall economic development, and this creates a score which is between 0 and 1, and 1 indicates a high level of economic development, and close to 1 is becoming again of course higher economic development, and 0 is the lowest level of economic development. So we get the value between 0 and 1. So just to summarize of human development index reform, so it came in 1990 by UNDP, as I mentioned, and till 2010 there are some methods through which we calculated human development index, and from 2010 we also have different methods that we consider for human development index. So now here on the extreme left column we have mentioned the dimensions. So here health and knowledge and the living standards and aggregation and then method. So let's discuss about what is the previous the earlier method that we considered while calculating HDI. So life expectancy at birth in terms of year, adult literacy rate in percentage we considered, and also combined gross registration rate in school that are considered, and GDP per capita like purchasing power parity we have taken into account, and the aggregation method that we considered is like arithmetic mean, and index is like giving equal weightage, and this is the following the arithmetic mean is like 1 by 3 the average of health index, education index and income index. And from 2010 life expectancy at birth it remains the same, but then in education, like especially in the knowledge, there's a slight changes. It's like expected number of schooling, number of years of schoolings, and average number of years of schooling. That is important, because here the debate is like just not attending is important, but then expected number of years of schoolings are important, and average number of years of schoolings are also important, or education is important. Here earlier GDP per capita was considered, and GNI per capita is taken into account from 2010. And of course as a student of economics what is the basic difference between GDP and GNI. Right, so GNI is like it is not only earnings or anything within the people who are getting it from the domestic, but as well as GNI considers income or earnings or transfer from the outside. So in the aggregation it is geometric mean. So steps for calculating, let's see how we calculate. Like step 1, creating the dimensions of the indices are very important, and then minimum and maximum value as said to transform the indicators are important, and setting the goal is very important, like lower and higher. Like say take the example of health. So minimum life expectancy for any country should be 20, and then maximum is like 85. So that is the goal setting. For education, expected years of schooling in terms of year is 0 minimum, like illiterate, and then 18 years of schooling is the maximum, and mean years of schooling like average is like 0 again, but then 15 is like at least graduation. That is the average. That is the maximum that one can actually set. And then you take here 1 by 3, and combining this is 1 by 3 and this is 1 by 3. So but then here since 1 by 3, but then here in education we have two subcategories, then we can put it 1 by 2 again to make it average here. So now constructing index here, like dimensions, how do we calculate? Like dimension index, we take the simple calculation method is like actual value and minus minimum value divided by maximum value minus minimum value. Health index we can calculate likewise, like actual value minus minimum value, then divided by maximum value minus minimum value. Education we have 2, since 2, then we'll take the average of expected years of schoolings and mean years of schooling. So here again, while calculating individual sub indicators, method is same, like actual minus minimum divided by maximum minus minimum. But since there are two indicators, we are actually taking the average of these two value, and finally HDI, we are taking the square root of health index, education index, and income index. So this is the two steps that we should be taking into account while calculating human development index. So now let's move to multidimensional poverty index. It was introduced in 2010 to complement human development index, and measures broadly are similar, like broad dimensions are kept same, like health, and then here education, and then standard of living, which is a proxy for the income. So this one, I mean MPI, is taken as a measurement to understand the incidence and intensity of the poverty at the household level and also at the individuals level. Like not only household, like how many members are there who are falling into that poverty trap. So who is poor and how are they poor, that are also taken into account in this multidimensional poverty index. And MPI allows identification of the incidence of poverty based on the demography, and it also considers indicators such as child mortality, nutrition, sanitation, electricity at the household, and other indicators. So although HDI of course is a very macro indicators, gives and shows how a nation or the state falls into within this HDI index parameters, while MPI measures the micro deprivation. So it also shows where it is lacking and how people can be out of the poverty and which are the dimensions. So MPI discuss about micro deprivations. So now let's go a little deeper into MPI. So here's Sabina Alkira and James Foster. I'm using their studies, and then we can see like three broad dimensions, just like human development index, like health, education, and standard of livings. And here in health, nutrition is taken into account, and child mortality. And we can also see in India, India also has adopted and also tried to, Niti Aayog is trying to calculate MPI to understand multidimensional poverty in context of India. And here in education, years of schooling and school attendance were taken into account. And then here 6 sub indicators have considered instead of level of income under standard of living. So one is cooking fuel, improved sanitations, safe drinking water, electricity, flooring of the households, and the assets. So these are 6 indicators were considered with regard to living standard. So now let's have a quick look about how we calculate. Like say here household 1, 2, and 3 and 4 households are there, and then these are the indicators, and here also equal weightage among the broad dimensions, like educations, like we are giving 1/3, in health we are giving 1/3, and in living standard we are giving 1/3. So when we talk about the weights for the dimensions, so this 1/3 is the broad weightage for the broad dimensions. And as you see that there are many sub indicators within the broad dimensions, we are also giving equal within the one broad indicators. Like the first one is like under education, like no one has completed 5 years schooling, and at least one school age child not enrolled in the household. So here it's like again we are giving equal weightage, like within that, like 1/3 divided by by 2 is coming like, each indicator is becoming 1 by 6, 1 by 6. Likewise, health we are making it, and here these are the responses, and the first row indicates like number of family members. Here like first household has 4 members, because we have to identify not only household, we also have to identify how many people are living in that particular household. And then 7 members in the household 2, 5 members in household 3, and 4 members in the household 4. And this is how up to this we calculate like the weightage, and these are the 0 is like no one, like response is 0, but 1 is like yes. Like say household 2 has, no one has come, response is no one has completed 5 years of schooling, and therefore this consider like this is a positive response in this respect. So here it is important to calculate the score C, which is like value. If we calculate every response, if we consider G, I, J, ith individual and jth household, and is the weight, and then combine this like 0 multiplied by 1 by 6, then it becomes 0. 1 multiplied by 1 by 6, then it becomes 1 by 6. This becomes 0, then this become 1 by 6. So if we add this, we get the sum of like, from here like 1 by 6, like we get 1 by 6 here, and we get 1 by 6 here. And then we get the value of C here. If we combine this like 1 by 6 plus 1 by 6, and then we get 1 by 2 by 6, like 1 by 3. So here we get one value, and then likewise we get the C value for household 2, and C value for household 3, and C value for the household 4. So now there is a threshold, and here Alkira and Foster MPI in calculation that they have considered any household which value is C value is either equals to or more than 1 by 3, they will be regarded as poor. And then census score, that way we'll get the census score, like actual value of that. So this way we'll get it. So now construction of MPI is his head count ratio, and then we get A is the intensity of the multidimensional poverty, and which is the sum, summing the weighted deprivation scores that we get from for each households, considering all the dimensions, and that is how we calculate. And then MPI we consider as product of or multiplication of head count ratio and intensity score, and that's how we'll get the MPI within standard of living that needs to be taken into account. So now this also one can actually reframe as per their objectives and the goals, and here just we have taken this indicators and their weights. In case of India, we have taken from Niti Aayog. You can see like in the health, nutrition, child and adolescent mortality is not only child, is child and adolescent mortality, and maternal health is taken into account. So here the subgroup is added here, and then years of schooling and school attendance have kept as it is. But here you can see like in general, Alkira's in calculations there were 6 indicators, but in case of India we also have considered bank account and making it 7 sub indicators under standard of living, and therefore weight will be 1 by 7 multiplied by 3 means 1 by 21. So this is in case of in India how we actually consider and perceive the indicators and their weights. So now of course poverty is important, but then to identify the problems and then trying to identify the methods are also important, and then here inequality also becomes one of the very, very important tools. So measures of dispersion that we all know that we know that these are the some statistical measures that we consider, like range, then standard deviations, mean deviations, and coefficient of variance. Now let's go to one of the very popular methods of inequality calculation, and this is Gini coefficient and Lorentz curve, and these are very popular methods of calculating, one of the very popular methods in calculating inequality. So Lorentz curve shows, like here, if we can see the box on the horizontal axis, we calculate cumulative share of the population, like here 25% if we write, then here 50% of the household, and then here 75, and then here is 100% of the total population. And on the vertical axis we have again like cumulative share of the income, like 25% of the households their income, and then 50%, and then here 75%. And you see the straight line, which is like 45-degree line, shows the line of equality. And then here the another Lorentz curve shows that it shows how this curve is far from the perfectly equal curve. So and then this area A is the area of inequality, and area A plus B is the total area of total area of equality and inequality. So Gini is calculated by area A divided by area A plus B, like is a half of the total box. So Lorentz curve, with the help of Lorentz curve, if we draw this one, like this one say for country X, and say this is for country Y, and this is say for country Z. So obviously country Y inequality score will be less as compared to country X, and then Gini will be higher in case of country Z, and this is the value that we will get it. So Gini, there are different ways and in which we can calculate, and there are different methods also, like for discrete variables and for continuous variables. So I'll stop here, and these are the references that I have used for this particular class. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'll see you in my next lecture.